John McMullen, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider. He's the YouTube sensation. I mean, you guys out there, you're making him, he's always been a big deal. But the YouTube views for John specifically, he's kind of a social media star. I don't know how else to put it. But I'm just honored that he graces us with his presence and drops knowledge on us every day at 4 p.m. So let's welcome in the YouTube star, John McMullen. John, what's up, man?
Hey, Ryan, I appreciate that. I'm not going to go Ron Burgundy on you. Say I'm kind of a big deal.
Right.
I'm not going to go down that road.
No, I know. You picked up on it. That's exactly that was my intentions, and you didn't miss a beat. All right, so where do you want to start today, John? Because, there's a couple things going on with the Eagles. First on-field OTA practice session is next Tuesday. Doug Peterson's going to speak then. Carson Wentz is going to speak. Some other news and notes going on. So I'm going to give you the reins. What's any updates for today so far?
Well, I think next Tuesday is big for a number of reasons. One, it's the first time we'll see this team, this sort of the beginning of the 90-man off-season roster and the race to September. That's the first time they're all together. We saw the rookies. We saw the first-year players, a couple of them mixed in at rookie camp, but everybody is here, and I think number one on the list is obviously Carson Wentz going to be able to go? Is he going to be able to participate, to practice? Is he going to be cleared from the stress fracture in his back? And that's going to be story number one. I imagine if he isn't, Doug Peterson talks before practice. He's not going to be very happy with the line of questioning. And I've tempered sort of the concern because obviously it's May. You don't need to play a game anytime soon. So I don't think it's time to panic if Carson isn't able to go. But you also have to make note of the fact that when this originally happened, the Eagles claimed they weren't concerned about him being ready for this point. So you at least have to put an asterisk on it and start to say what the heck is going on with this injury. And we all know the contract extension on the horizon. It's Carson Wentz's health is a big deal.
Yes, it is. And it feels like I'm in the twilight zone because, rewind to prior to last year's season, we were having these same exact conversations every day at 4 p.m. And I remember vividly asking you about how Doug Peterson was handling the questioning day in and day out with Carson Wentz's health, Nick Foles, that whole storyline. And he got heated, like you just said. Heated's an exaggeration, but he was frustrated and sick and tired.
Thank you, Doug, I call him.
Yeah. So are you looking into that, this offseason? Are you anticipating Doug handling that better, the same type of level of scrutiny? What do you expect from that whole storyline?
Well, when rookie camp opened, he got the question, and he was cranky, Doug, and he wasn't happy about it, and he kind of pushed it off to next week. And you're just going to get the questions again. So I'm not sure if that was the best way to do it. I do think it's a little bit different from last year from this perspective, and that's we knew Carson tore his ACL. We knew there was an LCL tear on top of it. So there's a standard sort of rehab time for that. And we always knew his particular goal was week one. He wasn't going to be around for off-season work, at least from a full-blown perspective. And actually, he showed up last year way ahead of schedule. And that had people very, very optimistic that he would be ready to go. Ultimately, he wanted to play week one, and the team held him back for a couple weeks. This time, it's an injury that's murkier, and there is no real timetable. that you can look at and sort of hang your hat on. We can just go with what the Eagles told us and no surgery, and it's not going to be an issue. And all of a sudden, here we are in May, and maybe it's an issue. So we'll see, though. It's too early to proclaim. But I've also said if they have any doubt that Carson Wentz isn't 100%, I wouldn't put him out there. Why bother? He doesn't need May work. So you also have to put that into the equation as well when you sort of weigh what's going on.
Are they going to pull a Sixers-like move and just kind of leave him out for a little bit regardless, even if he is 100% or close to it? I mean, you just made a good point. It's May. Why put him out there? Are we possibly not going to see him for a while?
Personally, from a personal standpoint, I say about every key veteran player, if there's anything wrong with them, if their ankle's a little cranky, if they got a hangnail, I'm not putting them out there. And that's anybody, not just the quarterback. I do think it's a little bit different from Carson's perspective because the injury tag is sort of dogging him now. So if he is 100%, you should throw him out there just to prove he's healthy. And it's very unlikely. Obviously, there's no pads, there's no contact, so nothing negative is going to happen from contact or anything of that nature. So there's a couple ways to look at it. In Carson's way, it's a little bit different than, say, Fletcher Cox. Fletcher is coming off surgery. Brandon Brooks is obviously coming off significant surgery. Guys like that who are hurt, you're not going to see them, and you shouldn't see them. With Carson, it's at least a tiny bit different because you want to send the message that he's healthy, he's ready to go, he's the leader of this team, he's worth what we're going to give him soon, most likely, and that's $30 million average annual value. So there's some other things that come into it.
And I'm sure on the flip side of that, meaning Carson's side of the fence, he wants to prove he's healthy. Like, he wants to get that contract. So not only for the Eagles, but
I mean, he's getting the contract.
Sure,
that part's not an issue. But yeah, he does want to prove he can stay healthy and be healthy and lead this team. And hey, he was pushing last year. As I said, the team held him back. It was the team who decided to err on the side of caution. If it were up to Carson, he would have been out there week one. So sometimes you do have to put the reins on him for his own good. In this situation, it as I said, that injury is murky. It's not often. You can't look around this league and point to a lot of guys who had a stress fracture in their back and say it took them however long, 6 months, 4 months, whatever. There's not a ton of guys in that column. This is a weird injury.
Yeah, whenever you say murky, John, it definitely scares me a little bit. But like you said, it's early, so we're going to keep an eye, obviously, on Carson Wentz and how he's handled moving forward. But you wrote an article yesterday, and I wanted to discuss it with you regarding Joe Douglas and Vice President of Player Personnel. And, you said it right at the top, whether it's today, next week, or next year, the Eagles understand, and it seems like they're preparing for his inevitable departure to, in his mind, hopefully bigger and better things. Any update on that, and what's your thought and opinion on when he potentially departs?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Adam Gase wants him, and they have a history together. It's not a long history. I think, part of that is overrated. They were just together for a year, but I think it's worth noting when anybody can get along with Adam Gase. So that's a positive in Joe's column. I think a lot of ways he's a guy that is probably going to have options. And when you do have options, you can be very, very careful. So I think he's going to look at that opening, and he's going to try to figure out what the Jets are. If you read sort of the Twitter outrage and the back page of the New York Post and the New York Daily News, they're a laughing stock right now. So I think you got to get a beat for that organization. You don't necessarily just want to take a job because that might be your only opportunity. Some guys have to do that. Mike McCagnon is a perfect example of that because he was not really on a lot of people's radars as the head of college scouting in Houston. He got an opportunity to be a GM. It's not like he can say, well, I'll get another GM offer. Joe can probably say that,
Right.
whether it's after next season, most likely. He can say that with some conviction. So it's kind of up to him. I think if he wants that Jets job, and I said it on the show yesterday, I think he can have it.
It's going to be interesting to see. John McMullen with us, as always, every day, 4 p.m., football at 4. Follow him on Twitter, JF McMullen, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider. Now, you said you tweeted this out. That's why I plugged your Twitter, of course, that it's a slippery slope, and you kind of just alluded to it in the last answer, but having two executives, quote-unquote, in the organization like that, what if Joe Douglas remains in the position all year long? How does that impact, if at all, how the organization operates?
No, I don't think that'll impact the Eagles at all. They understand where they are with Joe, and I've compared it to losing coaches, and it's the same thing. You know, and Jeffrey Lurie talked about it at the league meetings. If you're successful in this league, he said you're going to lose executives, and the Patriots have proven that. See all the ex-Patriots executives all over the league, Detroit, New England. Now you have that sort of Patriots South of Brian Flores and Miami. It's all over the place. You know it's coming. The Eagles already went through it from a coaching perspective with Frank Reich. I got to talk to Doug about that and ask him, how do you handle that? How do you do you groom guys to be future coordinators? And he says you're always doing it because you always know if you're gonna be as good as you hope to be, you're gonna lose guys. And that's why Andrew Berry is here. That's why he was hired. It was formerly in Cleveland with Sashi Brown, was their head of personnel, and the Eagles created a new position for him. At the time, they said it was just adding talent to the front office, but it was more than that. It was sort of the net for ultimately losing Joe Douglas whenever they lose him. But if Joe wants to stay, Joe's going to stay, and Joe's going to have a big stamp on this personnel department, and the Eagles have full confidence in him. I mean, he's a professional. He's going to do his job to the best of his ability. If he doesn't, he's not going to have those options I talked about. So that stuff kind of takes care of itself.
Right, and I was going to follow up with, do you think he has any less responsibility? I mean, clearly you're giving him the stamp of approval. Not that I'm not, but it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, you essentially hire a replacement for someone, and I'm just looking at it like, you know, our listeners out there, 9-to-5 jobs, whatever it may be, someone comes in and it's your replacement, and then you don't end up leaving, and now it's like, well, who do we go to? Do they share opinions and responsibility? I know they're titled differently, but it's still a challenging, quote-unquote, office dynamic.
No, I think it's more of what I just explained with Doug, and who has, you know, say the Eagles win another Super Bowl, and Jim Schwartz gets a head coaching job, or Mike Groh gets a head coaching job. He's got names in mind already, and they might be in-house, they might be out-of-house, but he's got a short list, and he's always got a short list. And that's what the Eagles have in the personnel department as well. They understand guys can leave. They understand everybody has a wish that is in the personnel side to be a general manager. And you can't be a general manager here because Howie Roseman is here, and Howie's not going anywhere. So if it's Joe and if it's Andrew Berry next, and he gets an opportunity to be a GM, he's going to leave too. So you always got to keep adding talent to your organization and grooming guys to be replacements when you do lose people, because that's just the NFL. If you're good and you want to be good, obviously that's the goal. And if you succeed, you know you're going to lose guys. That's part of it.
Right. You know, we're on the topic of player personnel, executives making all the decisions on the field, who stays, who goes, all of the good stuff that we talk about here every day with you. Do you anticipate, what's the next move, I should say, that you anticipate these guys making, player personnel-wise, in a trade, position, anything that you can predict that's on the horizon?
Well, I think from a talent gathering perspective, I do think they're finally done. The Eagles do more than most teams late in the process, and you've seen it recently with bringing in Zach Brown at linebacker, claiming Blake Countess off waivers at safety, bringing back Wiz most recently, signing Cody Kessler. The Eagles have done a lot in this sort of post-compensatory pick period and they've had success in the past, signing guys late. Chris Long, with Garrett Blunt, Patrick Robinson, not quite as late as this, but before that first phase of free agency. They've had success with these types of guys in the past, and they've done a good job with it, and Joe Douglas is a big part of that. And they've done a great job on the pro personnel side. And I do think you'll see some movement. It might even be going the other direction, whether it's trades of guys. This is a very deep team. Maybe if they like young players and they have to create spots, maybe you'll see some veterans on the trade block. Most notably would be Halapoulivaati Vaitai at tackle now that you have Andre Dillard, and still because of his contract, the Eagles are taking calls with Nelson Aguilar. So there could be guys leaving as well.
It's going to be interesting to see. John McMullen, every day, football at 4. John, before I let you go, I started off the show today. We're drastically shifting gears before we let you go, so just bear with me. I talked about
John Shander, so I can handle.
All right, I think that's a compliment. Jimmy Butler's Instagram post. I know you're very big into Instagram and posting selfies and everything else like that. So today there's been an overreaction, like everything else, with yeah, I know, it's crazy, right? With his caption on the photo, he was thanking Philadelphia and his teammates, and obviously that was interpreted, well, he's leaving. That's a goodbye, thank you, clearly. And, what that basically gave me the green light to have a discussion of Jimmy Butler. And is he staying? Is he going? Because I have people talking to me every day, John, recently. He's obviously staying. The Sixers can offer him the most money. Look at him, how he handled Embiid and everything else in the postseason, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you're not in his head. We have no idea what's going to happen. So I just wanted your thoughts because you covered the NBA for a very long time.
Well, I think, the people judging the Instagram post, I think that's more of a psychological experiment. And that's
right.
Sort of like, are you a glass is half full guy or a glass is half empty guy? I mean, all he said was thank you. There's no it can go either way. And that's sort of like a Rorschach test. Depending on the personality, you see something different. Ultimately, I think when you get to the money that Jimmy makes and you get to the part of his career where he's at, I think a lot of guys start to turn toward best available position as far as winning a title, especially the guys that don't have one. And I think if he thinks that's Philadelphia, he'll remain here. If he thinks it's elsewhere, he might leave. And I don't think the extra year and the ability to max them out would necessarily help that. If you can't live on the 4-year deal for that many millions, you got some issues. So I think a lot of it has to do with how the Sixers sell themselves and what he believes and how close this organization is.
Yeah, completely agree. We touched on all of those points you just made. John McMullen joining us today and every day, Monday to Friday, here on the Sports Bash for Football at 4, our 97.3 ESPN Eagles Insider. Be sure to give him a follow for the few people that aren't already following him on Twitter at JF McMullen for all of your Eagles news and Sixers and whatever else we decide to throw his way. John, as always, man, thank you for your time and have a good weekend.
You too. Thanks, Ryan.